In these days, of course, there was no formal priesthood. There was no essential connection between groups. And the church consisted of completely isolated ecclesias or assemblies, presided over by deacons or by persons appointed from the congregation. There was a period in which revelationism played a part, and there were what were called the apocalyptic movements in the early years of the church. The apocalyptic movements dealt with visions, ecstasies, prophecies, appearances, apparitions, and phenomena, attempting to prove through various mysterious circumstances the approaching advent or the second coming. Others of these groups went deeper and deeper into their own mystical contemplations, becoming hermits and going back into the desert. Some of these certainly were patterned upon the old Jewish prophets, who were a very remarkable group, completely different from our common idea of prophet, being persons self-illumined, self-appointed, yet generally recognized by others. It's an interesting phenomenon, but all of these things fitted together to produce the gradually increasing pressure that certainly ultimately had to be organized. It had to be brought into some kind of a formalization. While this pressure was at variance with the Roman Empire, under the pagan emperors, it was held much in abeyance. But after Constantine, there was a general discontinuance of persecution. And by degrees, the church began to fall, becoming, for that period, the church militant, or the church composed of aggressive leaders seeking to broaden the foundation of the religion as a moral and spiritual duty. Thus, from this period on, we have great changes. But let's see what happened somewhere else. In India, particularly, the motion began there, but it moved almost immediately to China. We find the rise of the concept of the Mahayana, or the great vehicle, the ship of salvation. We refer to certain parts of a church as the nave. And this, of course, actually means the ship. The Mahayana refers to Buddhism as the ship of the doctrine. And in early Christian religious art, the Christian faith is frequently represented as a ship, and is often so pictured upon what is called the fisherman's ring, or the ring of the papacy. Usually a ship is so represented as the symbol. This ship of the doctrine in India, China, had as its primary purpose the broadening of the foundation of human redemption. Salvation was no longer to be the result of a peculiar dispensation available only to those following certain extreme austerities. Salvation was no longer only for the individual who attained righteousness by his own efforts. Salvation was bestowed, or was a common birthright, and the individual could be saved in two ways, either by doing good or by repenting evil. This became a basic element in Mahayana Buddhism. And within 200 years, the deity Kuan Yin, the Buddhist equivalent to the concept of Mary, or the Holy Virgin, had gained tremendous dominance throughout Asia as the symbol of pure motherhood, pure love, and the ultimate forgiveness of sin. For to this deity was given the right to make men whole again through repentance. Prayers might then be addressed to this divinity, who was gradually transformed from a male deity of India into a female deity in China, Japan, and Korea. Thus the Mother of Mercy came to take precedence over the silent figure of Buddha seated in meditation. Buddha remained as the great teacher, but men did not approach him directly. They sought rather the solace of the understanding heart, the heart of the Great Mother. They went as children back to the Mother. In China, we have very much the same thing. The Taoist divinities began to take on these same aspects. And in Confucianism, love or emotional regard came to be considered more proper than filial devotion, based upon the precedents and formalities of the older beliefs. Thus, the faith of forgiveness became universally distributed. There is only one possible answer to it, and that is that we are measuring events by the internals of things. Now, we might say that if this occurrence of the first century was the only example of this cycle operating, that we were in the presence of a completely miraculous incident, an incident by means of which one important date could be made to stand out as supreme in all history and in all time. We can take this attitude if we wish, but there are certain things which it will not fully explain. One is why it should have simultaneously occurred among entirely different peoples of different beliefs. And the other thing is that this incident should, as far as its essential value is concerned, this representation of an internal motion from one condition to another, this crossing over from a way now past to a way to come, this evidence of a maturing within consciousness, this evidence is repeated periodically. Therefore, we are not in the presence only of one isolated occurrence. We are in the presence of an occurrence that with almost equal intensity occurs every 600 years. Thus, we cannot affirm it to be absolutely unique, but we can affirm with the mystic that it represents a positive growth of consciousness, a step in the great maturing of a creature, a compound being made up of generations, of histories, of cycles, and perhaps even enclosed within the broad pattern of the Eastern concept of rebirth. History comes to these critical focal points, and from them moves forward. The great value of Christianity was stated at the beginning of the era. In other words, the cycle begins with the advent of the teacher. And from that advent on, the purity and clarity of the original revelation gradually but relentlessly declined. The same was true 600 years earlier, when those persons living approximately in the 6th century BC, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Zoroaster Spitama, and Pythagoras, they formed the great challenging notes for their own people. And gradually these doctrines also declined. until at the end of 600 years they had all reached a critical state of declination. They had all declined to a degree in which either reformation must come or extinction was inevitable. Then in this critical moment, a complete revitalization through reinterpretation. This pattern again follows through into the next cycle, for it is approximately 600 years from the beginning of the Christian era to the rise of the Muslim world.